A poor boy rescues an infant from an overturned Cybertruck, unaware that it is the son of Elon Musk. His brave act becomes the beginning of an incredible story that changes his life forever. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching us from. The first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the tattered curtains of Isaac Harris's room. It wasn't much of a room, just a small corner partitioned off from the rest of their cramped two-bedroom apartment, but it was his sanctuary. Posters of cars and machines decorated the walls, their edges curling from the humidity. On his desk, an old second-hand laptop hummed faintly, a reminder of the late-night research he had been doing before falling asleep. Isaac's dreams were filled with blueprints, designs, and the hum of engines, visions of a future far removed from the reality he faced daily. He stirred awake to the faint clatter of pots and pans from the kitchen, followed by his mother's familiar voice calling out softly, "Isaac, sweetheart, time to get up. We've got a busy day." Isaac rubbed the sleep from his eyes and stretched, his muscles aching slightly from a part-time job he'd picked up the previous evening. The pay was minimal, but every dollar helped. He glanced over at the tiny mattress on the other side of the room where his 6-year-old sister, Lila, was still fast asleep. Her small form was wrapped tightly in a blanket, her face peaceful in the dim light. Isaac smiled to himself, determined to keep that peace intact for as long as possible. Sliding out of bed, he moved silently to avoid waking her. The cool floor creaked beneath his weight as he stepped into the kitchen, where the warm scent of oatmeal greeted him. His mother stood by the stove, her frame hunched and weary. Her once vibrant hair was hidden beneath a scarf, and the lines on her face told stories of long shifts at her 2 jobs. Yet, when she turned to Isaac, her smile was as radiant as ever. "Mornin', Ma," Isaac greeted, reaching for a pot to help her pour the oatmeal. "Mornin', sweetheart. Can you get Lila ready for school after breakfast? I've got to head out earlier today." "Double shift," she said, her voice tinged with both exhaustion and determination. Isaac nodded. "Of course. Don't worry about a thing. I'll take care of everything here." His mother placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening. "You're a good boy, Isaac. I don't know what I'd do without you." The weight of those words pressed against his chest as he smiled back at her. It was a weight he bore gladly, knowing how much his mother sacrificed for their family. As they ate their modest breakfast, Isaac stole glances at the worn envelope sitting on the edge of the kitchen counter, the latest utility bill with its ominous red lettering. His mother's eyes flicked toward it as well, though she said nothing. Isaac made a mental note to figure something out. The lights had already flickered twice last week, and he knew they couldn't afford to let the power be cut off. After breakfast, he gently woke Lila, who groaned in protest, but eventually giggled as Isaac tickled her awake. She adored her older brother, and Isaac took pride in that bond. Helping her tie her shoelaces and pack her small, worn-out backpack, he whispered encouraging words about her school day. The walk to her school was a daily ritual they both cherished. The neighborhood streets were lined with cracked pavement and graffiti-covered walls, but for Lila, it was an adventure. She held tightly to Isaac's hand, her chatter about school and her dreams of becoming a teacher filling the air. Isaac listened attentively, marveling at her ability to find joy amidst their struggles. "Will you build me a flying car one day, Isaac?" she asked suddenly, her wide eyes filled with wonder. Isaac chuckled. "You bet, Lila, and it'll be the best flying car you've ever seen." When they reached the school gates, Lila hugged him tightly before skipping off to join her classmates. Isaac watched her go, a faint smile lingering on his face. But as soon as she disappeared into the building, reality came crashing back. He had a long list of responsibilities to tackle before the day was done. First on the list was picking up groceries. His mother had handed him a crumpled $10 bill that morning, apologizing for not having more. Isaac knew how to stretch it, calculating prices and sales in his head as he made his way to the store. The streets were bustling with activity, vendors shouting about their goods, cars honking in the distance, and neighbors exchanging hurried greetings. Isaac passed by an old mechanic shop where he sometimes earned a few bucks helping clean tools or organize parts. Today, the shop was quiet, its owner nowhere in sight. As he approached the grocery store, Isaac's attention was drawn to a newsstand. A brightly colored headline caught his eye. Elon Musk announces new Tesla innovation. The article featured a sleek photo of the Cybertruck, and Isaac felt a pang of envy. He admired Musk not just for his wealth, but for his vision, his ability to create and innovate on a scale that seemed almost otherworldly. Isaac dreamed of working on projects like that, of being part of a team that built something extraordinary, but those dreams felt distant, almost unreachable. Shaken off the thought, he focused on the task at hand. Inside the store, he carefully selected items: a loaf of bread, a carton of eggs, and a small jug of milk. As he handed the cashier his mother's crumpled bill, he silently vowed to find a way to bring in more money. The walk back home was quieter, his thoughts heavy with worry. He couldn't shake the feeling that their situation was only getting worse. The red-lettered bill on the counter seemed to loom larger in his mind, a constant reminder of the challenges they faced. As Isaac climbed the stairs to their apartment, balancing the grocery bag in one hand, he resolved to do whatever it took to help his family. His mother deserved rest, Lila deserved opportunities, and Isaac deserved to make his dreams a reality, no matter how impossible they seemed. Stepping into the apartment, he placed the groceries on the counter and glanced at the laptop on his desk. It hummed faintly, waiting for him to dive back into his research. But there was no time for that now. His mother had already left for her shift and he had chores to finish before Lila returned from school. Isaac sighed, rolling up his sleeves. The day was far from over. The sun had climbed higher into the sky, its light reflecting off the cracked pavement as Isaac made his way back home from the store. His mind was consumed by calculations, not of engineering this time, but of survival. How long could they stretch this week's groceries? How much more could his mother bear working double shifts? And when, if ever, would he find a way to lighten her burden? The streets bustled with the usual chaos of the late morning. Vendors called out their prices, children ran after stray soccer balls, and the hum of distant traffic created a rhythm Isaac had grown accustomed to. Yet, even amidst this cacophony, his ears caught a sound that sliced through the din like a blade, a high-pitched screech of tires. Isaac turned instinctively toward the noise, just in time to see the silver blur of a Cybertruck careening out of control. The massive vehicle skidded, its tires struggling to grip the road as it veered toward a guardrail. A deafening crash echoed through the street as the truck flipped, landing upside down with a sickening crunch of metal and glass. Time seemed to freeze. Shards of glass scattered like diamonds across the pavement. Smoke began to curl upward from the vehicle, twisting into the air like a dark omen. Isaac's heartbeat thundered in his ears as bystanders gasped and whispered, forming an invisible barrier around the scene. No one moved closer. And then he heard it, a faint, desperate cry. It was unmistakable, piercing through the smoky haze. A baby's cry, Isaac's breath caught in his throat. His grip on the grocery bag tightened before he set it down on the sidewalk. His feet seemed rooted to the ground for a moment as his mind raced. What if the truck catches fire? What if I can't get the baby out? What if... But the sound of the infant's wail drowned out his doubts. Without another thought, he ran toward the overturned truck. The acrid smell of burning rubber and engine oil stung his nostrils as he approached. He could feel the heat radiating from the wreckage, but he forced himself closer, dropping to his knees beside the shattered window. Inside, the baby's cries grew louder, frantic. The child was strapped into a car seat in the back, its tiny face red with fear. "Hey, someone help me!" Isaac shouted over his shoulder, but the onlookers remained frozen, their faces a mix of shock and fear. Some held up their phones, recording the scene, but none stepped forward. Isaac clenched his fists, anger and determination surging through him. "Fine," he muttered under his breath. "I'll do it myself." The back door was crumpled and jammed, refusing to budge despite his efforts to yank it open. His hands trembled as he searched the ground for something, anything that could help. His eyes landed on a chunk of concrete lying near the curb. Grabbing it, he smashed it against the window with all his strength. The glass shattered, spraying tiny fragments over his arms and face. He barely noticed the sting. Reaching into the vehicle, he carefully unfastened the straps holding the baby in place. The cries grew louder as he pulled the infant free, holding it close to his chest. The child was wrapped in a soft blue blanket, embroidered with elegant silver stitching. It was only when Isaac looked closer that he noticed the letters stitched into the fabric. XAEA 12. For a moment, his mind struggled to process what he was seeing. The name was familiar, unmistakable in fact. He'd seen it in countless headlines, in news clips about one of the most enigmatic figures of the modern world. This wasn't just any baby. This was the youngest child of Elon Musk. "Holy," Isaac whispered, his voice barely audible over the baby's sobs. His hands shook as he cradled the infant, the weight of the realization hitting him like a tidal wave. The distant sound of sirens began to grow louder, but Isaac knew he couldn't wait. Smoke was now billowing thick and black from the truck's engine, and every second felt like an eternity. He turned back toward the crowd. "I need to get the baby somewhere safe," he shouted. "Does anyone know where the Tesla factory is?" The murmurs of the crowd didn't provide him with an answer, and he couldn't afford to waste time asking again. He remembered hearing about a Tesla facility a few miles away, a place where innovation and safety were paramount. If Elon Musk was anywhere nearby, it would be there. Clutching the baby tightly, Isaac took off down the street, his sneakers pounding against the pavement. His lungs burned as he ran, the weight of the child pressing against his arms. Sweat dripped down his forehead, mixing with the grime and tiny cuts left by the shattered glass. The sound of the sirens faded behind him, replaced by the rhythmic thud of his own heartbeat. The streets blurred as he focused solely on putting one foot in front of the other. People turned to stare as he passed. A teenage boy, his clothes torn and stained, carrying a crying baby wrapped in an expensive-looking blanket. Some tried to stop him, their voices trailing behind as he pushed forward. Isaac didn't have time to explain. By the time the gates of the Tesla facility came into view, his legs felt like they were made of lead. The towering structure loomed ahead, sleek and futuristic, a stark contrast to the chaos he'd just left behind. 2 security guards stood at the entrance, their postures stiffening as Isaac approached. "Help!" Isaac called out, his voice hoarse. "It's an emergency. I need to see Elon Musk." The guards exchanged wary glances, their hands hovering near their radios. One of them stepped forward, his expression cautious. "Kid, what's going on here? Whose baby is that?" Isaac didn't have the energy for a detailed explanation. He held up the blanket, the embroidered name glinting in the sunlight. "It's his baby," he gasped. XAEA-12. There was an accident. Please, I need to get him to safety." The guard's eyes widened slightly as he read the name, realization dawning. He muttered something into his radio, his voice low and urgent. Moments later, the heavy gates began to slide open with a metallic hum. "Come with me," the guard said, his tone sharper now. "But keep it calm. We need to verify everything." Isaac nodded, too exhausted to respond. The guard led him across the pristine courtyard toward the main building, where more staff were beginning to gather. Whispers rippled through the group as they caught sight of Isaac and the baby. The enormity of what he'd just done began to sink in. His arms ached, his knees wobbled, but he held his head high. He didn't know what would happen next, but he knew one thing for certain. He had done the right thing. The heavy gates of the Tesla facility slid open, the metallic hum reverberating in Isaac's ears as he stepped onto the pristine courtyard. The stark contrast between the sleek, futuristic world and the chaos he had just fled from made his surroundings feel almost surreal. He tightened his grip on the baby in his arms, whose cries had softened into hiccup and whimpers, and focused on the guard leading him toward the main building. Behind them, the gates clanged shut, blocking out the distant sounds of sirens and the murmurs of the crowd that had gathered near the accident. Isaac's breath was ragged, his body trembling from exhaustion, but his mind remained sharp. He had made it this far. He couldn't falter now. As they approached the facility's entrance, a group of Tesla employees began to emerge. Their sharp uniforms and professional demeanors added to Isaac's sense of being out of place. Their eyes widened at the sight of him, a disheveled teenager with torn clothes, smudged with dirt and blood, holding a baby wrapped in an embroidered blanket that some of them recognized immediately. The guard waved them back, his tone firm but respectful. "Clear the way. This is urgent." Isaac's heart raced as the door to the building slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, the air was cool and sterile, the polished floors reflecting the overhead lights. He barely had time to take in the sleek, minimalist design before a man in a tailored suit appeared. His expression shifted from confusion to alarm as his gaze fell on the child in Isaac's arms. "Is that?" the man began, but his voice trailed off as he stepped closer, his eyes narrowing on the blanket. "Oh my God, that's XAEA-12. Isaac nodded, his voice hoarse from running. "There was an accident. A Cybertruck flipped over on the road. No one else was helping, so I got him out. I didn't know where else to take him." The man's face softened, a mixture of relief and gratitude washing over his features. "You did the right thing," he said firmly, placing a hand on Isaac's shoulder. "Wait here. I'll inform Mr. Musk." As the man disappeared down a hallway, Isaac exhaled shakily. He sank onto a nearby bench, cradling the baby close as the weight of the past half hour began to settle on him. His arms ached from holding the child, and the sting of the cuts on his hands grew more pronounced. But the sight of the baby's calm face, his tiny fingers clutching the edge of the blanket, filled Isaac with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. The room buzzed with subdued activity. Staff members whispered among themselves, their glances alternating between the baby and Isaac. A woman approached with a first aid kit, her expression kind but professional. "Let me take a look at your hands," she said gently, kneeling beside him. Isaac hesitated, reluctant to shift his focus away from the baby, but the woman's steady gaze reassured him. Carefully, he adjusted his grip on the child so she could examine his palms. The cuts were shallow but numerous, with tiny shards of glass still embedded in some places. "You're lucky these aren't worse," the woman said, her voice calm but firm. "This might sting a little." Isaac winced as she cleaned the wounds, the antiseptic biting into his skin. Still, he barely flinched, his focus fixed on the baby's soft breaths. Before the woman could finish bandaging his hands, the sound of hurried footsteps drew everyone's attention. Isaac looked up to see Elon Musk himself enter in the room, his presence commanding yet understated. Dressed in a simple blazer and jeans, he carried himself with an air of quiet authority. His eyes locked onto the baby, and in that moment, Isaac saw something raw and human in the tech mogul's usually composed demeanor. Musk strode forward, his pace quickening as he reached Isaac. Without a word, he gently took the baby into his arms, his hands trembling slightly as he cradled his son. The room fell silent, the weight of the moment palpable. "He's safe," Isaac said quietly, his voice breaking the stillness. "He's okay." Musk looked up, his eyes meeting Isaac's for the first time. They were filled with a complex mix of emotions, relief, gratitude, and perhaps a hint of disbelief. "Thank you," Musk said, his voice low but sincere. "You saved my son." Isaac shook his head, his words tumbling out. I heard him crying. No one else was moving. I couldn't just stand there." Musk's gaze lingered on him as if trying to fully comprehend the teenager standing before him. "What's your name?" he asked. "Isaac Harris," he replied, his voice steadier now. Musk nodded, glancing down at his son, who was beginning to drift off to sleep in his arms. For a moment, the world seemed to shrink, leaving only the three of them in the room. "You're a brave young man, Isaac," Musk said, his voice carrying an unexpected warmth. "Not many people would have done what you did today." Isaac felt a lump rise in his throat, but he swallowed it down. "I just did what anyone would do," he said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. Musk's expression softened further, and he motioned for one of his assistants to approach. "Get this young man some water and a proper place to sit. I want him looked after." Isaac started to protest, his instincts telling him not to impose, but Musk raised a hand to silence him. "You've done enough today. Let us take care of you for a change." The assistant led Isaac to a quieter area of the building, where he was given water and a chance to catch his breath. As he sat down, the reality of what had just happened began to sink in. He had saved the life of one of the most famous people's children. And now, he was sitting in the heart of Tesla's operations, being treated like a hero. But beneath the surface, a new worry began to take shape. What would happen next? Would he be interrogated, doubted, or forgotten? He didn't have time to dwell on these thoughts for long, as Musk soon returned, carrying a clipboard and a thoughtful expression. "Isaac," he began, pulling up a chair to sit across from him, "I want to hear your story. Tell me about yourself. How did you end up being the one to save my son?" The question caught Isaac off guard, but as he began to speak, the words flowed naturally. He told Musk about his family, his mother's endless shifts, and his younger sister Lila, who dreamed of flying cars. He spoke about his love for engineering, his sketches and ideas, and the dreams that felt out of reach in the face of his family's struggles. Musk listened intently, his eyes never leaving Isaac's face. When the boy finished, the room was quiet for a moment. Then Musk leaned forward, his expression unreadable. "Isaac," he said slowly, "you've already proven that you have the courage and the heart to make a difference. And from what you've just told me, you have the potential to do so much more." Isaac frowned slightly, unsure of where this was going. "What do you mean?" he asked. Musk smiled faintly. "I mean, I want to help you. You saved my son's life today. Let me return the favor by giving you an opportunity. Have you ever considered working at Tesla?" Isaac's breath caught in his throat. The idea seemed so far-fetched, so impossible that he almost laughed. But when he saw the sincerity in Musk's eyes, he realized this was no joke. This was real. "You're serious?" Isaac whispered. "As serious as I can be," Musk replied. "You've already proven you're someone I can trust. Let's start with something simple. A part-time role after school. You can learn from my team, see how things work here. What do you say?" Isaac's mind raced. He thought of his mother, of Lila, of the bills piling up on their counter. And then he thought of his dreams, the blueprints on his walls, the future he'd almost given up on. "I'd love to," he said, his voice filled with quiet determination. "Thank you." Musk extended his hand, and Isaac shook it firmly, feeling a surge of hope he hadn't felt in years. For the first time, the future didn't feel so impossible. It felt like it was finally within his grasp. The echo of Elon Musk's words still resonated in Isaac's mind as he was escorted out of the Tesla facility later that afternoon. His steps felt lighter, as if the weight of the world had temporarily lifted from his shoulders. The promise of an opportunity, a real opportunity, had ignited something in him that he hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. But as Isaac made his way back home, the reality of his circumstances crept back in. The streets of his neighborhood were as familiar as ever. Cracked sidewalks, faded graffiti, and the faint smell of fried food wafting from a nearby vendor. The contrast between Tesla's gleaming innovation and the worn-down surroundings of his home felt sharper now. His heart raced as he thought about how he would explain the day's events to his mother. Would she believe him? Would she worry about him getting his hopes up? He had no answers, but one thing was clear. This day was going to change everything. When Isaac reached their small apartment, he paused at the door, gathering his thoughts. The sounds of a pot clattering and Lila's soft humming came from inside. Taking a deep breath, he opened the door. Lila looked up from the kitchen table, her face lighting up as she ran toward him. "Isaac!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around his waist. "You're home!" Isaac ruffled her hair, smiling despite the whirlwind of emotions inside him. "Hey, Squirt, you been good for Ma?" "Uh-huh." She nodded enthusiastically. "We were just making dinner. Well, I'm helping." Their mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. Her expression shifted from relief to concern as she took in Isaac's disheveled appearance. His clothes were still dirty and torn from the accident, and the bandages on his hands were impossible to miss. "Isaac," she said, her voice tinged with worry. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I'm fine, Ma," Isaac replied quickly, raising his hands to reassure her. "Really, it's nothing serious. But I need to tell you something. Can we sit down?" The seriousness in his tone made her pause. She gestured for him to sit at the table while she finished stirring the pot on the stove. Lila followed, climbing onto her chair and watching him with wide, curious eyes. Once they were all seated, Isaac began. He told them everything: the accident, the overturned Cybertruck, the baby's cries, and his decision to act. He described the moment he realized whose child it was and his frantic journey to the Tesla facility. By the time he finished, his mother's hand was covering her mouth, her eyes brimming with tears. Lila sat quietly, her face a mixture of awe and confusion. "You saved a baby?" Lila asked softly, her voice filled with wonder. Isaac nodded. "Yeah, I couldn't just leave him there. And guess what? The baby's dad, he was Elon Musk." Lila gasped, her eyes widening. "The car guy? The one who makes robots and spaceships?" Isaac couldn't help but smile at her excitement. "Yeah, that's him, and he offered me a job." His mother finally found her voice, though it trembled with emotion. "A job? Isaac, what do you mean? What kind of job?" "It's part-time," Isaac explained. "After school. He wants me to learn from his team at Tesla. He said it could be a way to start something bigger." His mother's eyes filled with tears again, and she reached out to squeeze his hand. "Isaac, I don't even know what to say. You've always been such a good boy, but this is beyond anything I could have imagined. I'm so proud of you." Lila climbed onto Isaac's lap, hugging him tightly. "You're a hero, Isaac," she declared, her small arms wrapping around his neck. Isaac held her close, feeling a surge of emotion he couldn't quite name. For so long, he had felt like he was just surviving, barely keeping his family afloat. But now, for the first time, he felt like he was truly moving forward. The next morning, Isaac woke up early, his mind still reeling from the events of the previous day. As he got ready for school, he glanced at the sketches taped to the wall above his desk, blueprints for cars, machines, and gadgets he had dreamed of building. They felt less like idle fantasies now, and more like tangible possibilities. At school, he struggled to focus on his classes. His mind kept drifting back to the Tesla factory, wondering what it would be like to step into that world again. This time, not as an outsider, but as someone with a purpose. During lunch, his best friend Jordan plopped down beside him, immediately noticing his distracted demeanor. "All right, spill," Jordan said, taking a bite of his sandwich. "You've been spaced out all day. What's going on?" Isaac hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to explain everything, but Jordan was one of the few people he trusted completely. Taking a deep breath, he told him the whole story. Jordan's jaw dropped, his sandwich forgotten on the table. Dude, you saved Elon Musk's kid, and he offered you a job? That's insane." "I know," Isaac said, shaking his head. "It doesn't even feel real." Jordan leaned back, a huge grin spreading across his face. "Man, you're living in a movie. You're like the chosen one or something." Isaac laughed, though the idea of being chosen felt overwhelming. Still, Jordan's enthusiasm was infectious, and for the first time that day, Isaac allowed himself to feel genuinely excited. That afternoon, Isaac made his way to the Tesla factory for his first official day. As he approached the gates, the same guard from before greeted him with a nod, his demeanor more welcoming this time. "Mr. Musk's been expecting you," the guard said, opening the gate. Isaac stepped onto the grounds, his heart pounding with anticipation. The sleek architecture and hum of activity felt even more intimidating now that he was here as part of the team. He was led to a conference room where a group of engineers were waiting for him. One of them, a middle-aged man with glasses and a kind smile, stepped forward. "You must be Isaac," he said, extending a hand. "I'm George, and I'll be your mentor while you're here." Isaac shook his hand, his nerves easing slightly at George's approachable demeanor. "Nice to meet you," he said. Over the next few hours, George gave Isaac a tour of the facility, introducing him to the various departments and explaining the basics of the projects they were working on. Isaac soaked up every word, his curiosity overpowering his initial nervousness. By the end of the day, he was exhausted but exhilarated. As he left the factory, the weight of the opportunity he had been given settled on his shoulders. He knew this was only the beginning, and he was determined to prove that he belonged here. When Isaac got home, his mother was waiting for him, a warm meal on the table and a tired but proud smile on her face. Lila rushed to greet him, demanding to know everything about his first day. As they sat together, laughing and sharing stories, Isaac felt something he hadn't felt in a long time: hope. The future no longer seemed like an impossible dream. It was something he could reach out and grab, one step at a time, and with his family by his side, he knew he had the strength to do it. Isaac's footsteps echoed softly against the polished floors of the Tesla facility as he made his way down the long hallway. The building hummed with energy, a quiet symphony of innovation, as engineers and technicians moved purposefully from one station to another. His second day had begun with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. George, his mentor, had promised to introduce him to a few ongoing projects and teach him the basics of working in a professional engineering environment. Though Isaac still felt like an outsider in this sleek, fast-paced world, a part of him also felt like he belonged. For as long as he could remember, he had dreamed of places like this. Places where ideas became reality, where every challenge was met with creativity and determination. Now he was here, walking among the very people who turned those dreams into tangible creations. As he reached George's workstation, he was greeted with a warm smile and a cup of coffee. "Morning, Isaac," George said, gesturing for him to sit. "How are you feeling today? Ready for more?" Isaac nodded, his nerves giving way to a determined grin. "I'm ready. What's the plan?" George chuckled, appreciating the boy's enthusiasm. "We're going to start small today. I want you to observe and learn, ask questions, and maybe, if you're up for it, tackle a simple task by the end of the day." Isaac's eyes lit up. "I can do that." The first few hours flew by as George walked him through the fundamentals of Tesla's design and manufacturing processes. Isaac's notebook quickly filled with sketches, equations, and notes as he absorbed everything he could. George occasionally stopped to test his understanding, and Isaac surprised him with his quick grasp of the concepts. By lunchtime, Isaac had already impressed several of the team members with his eagerness to learn. One of the senior engineers, a woman named Clara, even commented, "You've got a sharp mind, kid. I can see why Elon took an interest in you." Isaac's cheeks flushed with pride, though he tried to downplay it. "I just want to help. This has always been my dream." That evening, after a long day at the facility, Isaac returned home feeling a mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. As he stepped through the door, the familiar aroma of his mother's cooking greeted him. Lila ran up to him, her face glowing with excitement. "Isaac! Isaac! How was your day?" she asked, bouncing on her toes. Isaac laughed, setting down his backpack and ruffling her hair. "It was amazing, Lila. I got to see how they build some of the coolest machines. Maybe one day I'll build one just for you." Her eyes widened. "Like a flying car?" "Exactly like a flying car," Isaac replied, grinning. "But first, I've got a lot to learn." At dinner, Isaac shared stories from his day, carefully explaining the concepts he had learned in a way that even Lila could understand. His mother listened intently, her eyes brimming with pride. For the first time in years, she saw a spark in her son that she hadn't seen since before their lives had taken a turn for the worse. "You've always been so good with your hands, Isaac," she said, her voice soft but full of emotion. "I remember when you were little, You used to take apart your toys just to figure out how they worked. I'd find you in the corner with screws and wires everywhere, but you'd always put them back together, better than before." Isaac smiled at the memory. "I guess I've always been curious. I just never thought I'd get the chance to do something like this." His mother reached across the table, placing her hand over his. "You've worked so hard for this, sweetheart. You deserve it, and no matter what happens, I'm proud of you." The next few weeks settled into a rhythm. Isaac would go to school in the morning, his mind often drifting to the projects waiting for him at Tesla, and head to the facility in the afternoon. Each day brought new challenges and opportunities to learn. George and Clara became his mentors, guiding him through tasks that grew progressively more complex. One afternoon, George handed Isaac a small motor that had been giving the team trouble. "Think you can figure this out?" he asked, his tone half challenging, half encouraging. Isaac examined the motor, his fingers tracing the intricate components. He thought back to the countless hours he had spent tinkering with broken appliances at home, his mind piecing together solutions like a puzzle. After a few minutes, he nodded. "I'll give it a shot." It took him the better part of an hour, but when he finally presented the repaired motor to George, the older man let out an impressed whistle. "You've got a real knack for this, Isaac. Keep it up." As word of Isaac's talent spread, more team members began to take an interest in him. They invited him to observe brainstorming sessions where ideas for new projects were tossed around like sparks in a fire. Isaac soaked it all in, his mind racing with possibilities. One evening, as he was packing up to leave, Elon Musk himself appeared in the workshop. The room fell silent as everyone turned to greet their boss, but Musk's attention was focused solely on Isaac. "How's it going, Isaac?" he asked, his tone casual but genuine. Isaac straightened, feeling a surge of nervous energy. "It's going great, sir. I've been learning a lot." Musk nodded, glancing at the sketches and notes scattered across Isaac's workstation. "I can see that. George tells me you've been doing some impressive work." Isaac's heart swelled with pride, but he tried to remain modest. "I'm just trying to help where I can." Musk studied him for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "You know, when I was your age, I was obsessed with solving problems. Didn't matter what they were, big or small. I see that same drive in you. Don't lose it." Isaac nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "I won't, sir. Thank you." As Musk walked away, Isaac couldn't help but feel a renewed sense of purpose. He wasn't just learning skills or fixing motors, he was building a foundation for something greater. One night, as Isaac lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, he thought about the future. He imagined himself working alongside the engineers at Tesla, designing machines that could change the world. He thought about his family, about giving his mother and Lila a better life. And for the first time, those dreams didn't feel so far away. They felt possible. Closing his eyes, Isaac smiled. Tomorrow was another day, another step toward the life he had always imagined, and he was ready to face it head on. The hum of machinery echoed softly in the distance as Isaac Harris leaned over the desk in the Tesla workshop, his fingers meticulously adjusting the components of a prototype motor. He had grown more confident over the weeks, his hands now steady and sure as they worked through intricate mechanisms. The air smelled faintly of grease and electricity, and the quiet buzz of conversation among the engineers around him felt comforting, almost like he belonged here. Today was different, though. Isaac could feel it in the air, a sense of anticipation that lingered just below the surface. George had handed him a new project earlier that morning, one that required more precision and understanding than anything he'd tackled before. It was a test, a challenge to see how much he'd learned. He wasn't going to let them down. The door to the workshop slid open, and Isaac glanced up to see Clara entering, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She spotted him and smiled, making her way over with her usual brisk efficiency. "How's it going, Isaac?" she asked, nodding toward the motor in his hands. "Almost done," he replied, carefully securing a wire. "I think I've got the alignment issue fixed." Clara raised an eyebrow, leaning over to inspect his work. "Not bad," she said after a moment, a hint of approval in her tone. "You've got a good eye for detail. That's going to take you far." Isaac felt a flush of pride at her words. Praise from someone like Clara wasn't easily earned, and it made the long hours and hard work feel worth it. "Thanks," he said, his voice steady but tinged with excitement. "I'm just trying to keep up." Clara smirked, crossing her arms. "You're doing more than that. Keep this up, and you'll be running your own projects in no time." The thought sent a thrill through Isaac, but he quickly pushed it aside. There was still so much to learn, and he wasn't about to get ahead of himself. For now, he focused on finishing the task at hand. Later that evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Isaac made his way home. The streets of his neighborhood were as familiar as ever, but they felt different now, less confining, more like a starting point than a limitation. He thought about everything he'd accomplished in the past few weeks, about the opportunities that had opened up for him. It was almost surreal to think about how much his life had changed since the day of the accident. When he reached his apartment, the warm glow of the living room light spilled out onto the landing. Inside, Lila was sprawled on the floor with a coloring book, her crayons scattered around her. She looked up as Isaac entered, her face lighting up with excitement. "Isaac, you're home!" she exclaimed, scrambling to her feet and running to hug him. He laughed, scooping her up and spinning her around before setting her down gently. "Hey, Squirt, how was your day?" "Good," she said, bouncing on her toes. "We learned about space in school today. Did you know there are places where it's so cold, it's like a million freezers?" Isaac grinned, ruffling her hair. "Sounds like you're going to be the next big scientist in the family." Their mother appeared in the doorway, a dish towel in her hands and a tired but warm smile on her face. "Dinner's almost ready," she said. "How was work?" Isaac hesitated for a moment, searching for the right words. "It was good," he said finally, his voice thoughtful. "I feel like I'm really starting to figure things out." His mother's smile grew and she walked over to place a hand on his shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Isaac. You've worked so hard for this. You deserve every bit of it." The weight of her words settled over him, filling him with a mixture of pride and determination. He had come so far, but there was still so much he wanted to do, for himself, for his family, for the future he was beginning to envision. The next day, at Tesla, George called Isaac into one of the conference rooms. The space was sleek and modern, with large windows that offered a view of the factory floor below. George motioned for Isaac to sit, his expression unreadable. "What's up?" Isaac asked, trying to gauge the mood. George leaned back in his chair, his hands clasped in front of him. "Isaac, we've been watching you closely these past few weeks, and I have to say, you've impressed us. Not just with your skills, but with your attitude and your willingness to learn." Isaac felt a swell of pride, but forced himself to stay grounded. "Thank you," he said. "I've been trying my best." George nodded. "And it shows." That's why we've decided to give you a bigger opportunity. There's a new project we're working on, a prototype for a more efficient electric motor. It's still in the early stages, but we want you to be part of the team." Isaac blinked, the weight of George's words sinking in. "You mean, like, actually work on it? With the team?" "That's right," George said, smiling slightly. "It won't be easy, but we think you're ready." For a moment, Isaac couldn't speak. The idea of contributing to a project like this, of being part of something that could make a real impact, felt almost too good to be true. But then he remembered everything he had learned, everything he had worked for, and he nodded. "I'm ready," he said, his voice firm. Over the next few weeks, Isaac threw himself into the project with everything he had. The work was challenging, often frustrating, but it was also exhilarating. He spent hours studying schematics, running simulations, and collaborating with the other team members. Clara and George guided him through the more complex aspects, but they also gave him the freedom to explore his own ideas. One night, as he was poring over a set of blueprints in the workshop, Elon Musk appeared in the doorway. Isaac looked up, startled, and quickly stood. "Relax, Isaac," Musk said, a faint smile playing at his lips. "Just wanted to see how things were going." Isaac hesitated, then gestured to the blueprints. "It's going well. We're still working on a few issues, but I think we're making progress." Musk nodded, stepping closer to examine the plans. "You've come a long way since you first walked in here," he said, his tone thoughtful. "What you're doing now, it's not just work. It's laying the foundation for something bigger, something that could change lives." Isaac's heart swelled at the words, and he found himself speaking without thinking. "I just want to make a difference. For my family, for people like us who don't always get these kinds of chances." Musk studied him for a long moment, his gaze intense but not unkind. "And you will," he said finally. "Just remember, the path isn't always easy, but as long as you stay focused, stay true to who you are, you'll go farther than you ever thought possible." Isaac nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Thank you, sir. I won't let you down." The days turned into weeks, and the project continued to progress. Isaac found himself growing not only as an engineer, but as a person. He learned to trust his instincts, to ask for help when he needed it, and to push through challenges with determination and creativity. At home, his family began to notice the change in him. Lila often sat with him as he worked on sketches and notes, peppering him with questions about his projects. His mother, though tired from her own long days, seemed lighter, her smile more frequent. The bills were still a struggle, but for the first time in a long time there was a sense of hope in their tiny apartment. One evening, as Isaac sat at the kitchen table with Lila, she looked up at him with wide, curious eyes. "Isaac," she said, her voice small but serious, "do you think I could work at Tesla one day like you?" Isaac smiled, ruffling her hair. "I think you can do anything you set your mind to, Lila, and when you're ready, I'll be there to help you every step of the way." Her face lit up, and she threw her arms around him, squeezing tightly. Isaac held her close, feeling a swell of pride and determination. For his family, for his future, and for everything he had fought for, he knew he would keep pushing forward. This was only the beginning, and he was ready for whatever came next. The following weeks at Tesla passed in a whirlwind of activity. Isaac's days began early and ended late, each one packed with challenges that pushed him to his limits and victories that fueled his determination. The project on the new prototype motor had taken on a life of its own, with Isaac contributing ideas that had earned him the respect of even the most seasoned engineers. It was a far cry from the boy who had first walked into the facility, unsure of his place among the polished floors and brilliant minds. Now, Isaac felt like he belonged, not just to Tesla, but to a future he was beginning to shape with his own hands. One crisp morning, Isaac arrived at the factory to find an unusual buzz in the air. The energy among the team felt different, as though something big was on the horizon. George greeted him with a knowing grin as he handed Isaac a cup of coffee. "Big day today, kid," George said, his voice tinged with excitement. Isaac frowned, his curiosity piqued. "What's going on?" "You'll see," George replied cryptically, patting him on the back. "Let's just say someone's been paying close attention to your work." Before Isaac could press further, Clara appeared, beckoning him toward the main conference room. "Come on, Isaac," she said, her smile betraying nothing. "You don't want to keep the boss waiting." Isaac's stomach twisted with nervous anticipation as he followed her. The walk to the conference room felt longer than usual, each step amplifying his sense of uncertainty. When they entered, he was greeted by a room filled with familiar faces, his mentors, his colleagues, and at the head of the table, Elon Musk himself. "Isaac," Musk said, standing as Isaac approached. His tone was warm, his expression one of genuine pride. "Take a seat. We've got something to discuss." Isaac hesitated for a moment before sitting down, his heart pounding in his chest. Musk gestured toward a screen on the wall, which lit up with images of the prototype motor Isaac and the team had been working on. As the presentation began, Isaac's contributions to the project were highlighted in detail, his ideas and solutions woven seamlessly into the narrative. When the presentation ended, Musk turned to Isaac, his gaze steady. "You've done exceptional work here," he said. "Your contributions to this project have been invaluable, and it's clear that you have a talent for innovation. But what's even more impressive is your story, the journey that brought you here." Isaac's cheeks flushed as he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. "I just wanted to help," he said quietly. "That's all I've ever wanted to do." "And you've done more than that," Musk replied. "You've inspired others, not just here at Tesla, but beyond. Your story has started to spread, and people are paying attention." Isaac frowned, unsure of what he meant. "What do you mean, spread?" Musk smiled, tapping a few keys on the laptop in front of him. The screen changed to show a news article, its headline bold and eye-catching. "Teen hero saves Elon Musk's son and finds his calling at Tesla." Isaac's eyes widened as he scanned the article. It recounted the events of the accident, the rescue, and his journey at Tesla, painting him as a symbol of courage and determination. There were quotes from bystanders who had witnessed the accident, comments from Tesla employees praising his work, and even a brief statement from Musk himself. I didn't know this was out there," Isaac stammered, his voice tinged with disbelief. "It's been making waves," Musk said. "People see your story and they see hope. They see what's possible when someone refuses to give up, no matter the odds." Isaac sat back in his chair, the weight of it all sinking in. He had never sought recognition for what he had done. All he wanted was to make a difference, to create a better life for his family. But now, his story was out in the world, touching lives he had never even imagined. The impact of the article was immediate. Within days, Isaac's inbox was flooded with messages, from students seeking advice, from professionals offering mentorship, and from strangers who simply wanted to thank him for inspiring them. His social media accounts, which had once been a quiet corner of the internet, were now alive with activity, filled with comments and shares from people across the globe. At first, it was overwhelming. Isaac wasn't used to being in the spotlight, and he struggled to navigate the sudden attention. But as he read through the messages, a pattern began to emerge. People were sharing their own struggles and dreams, their hopes and fears, and Isaac realized that his story had given them something they desperately needed: belief in themselves. One message in particular stood out. It was from a young boy named Marcus who lived in a small town hundreds of miles away. Marcus wrote about how he had always wanted to be an engineer, but had been told it was impossible because of his family's financial struggles. He ended the message with a simple question: "If you can do it, do you think I can too?" Isaac's chest tightened as he read the words. He thought about his own journey, about the people who had believed in him and given him a chance when he needed it most, and he knew what he had to do. The next time Isaac visited Tesla, he sought out Musk in his office. The space was as sleek and minimalist as the rest of the facility, but the shelves were lined with books and models that hinted at Musk's insatiable curiosity. "Isaac," Musk said, looking up from his desk, "what brings you here?" Isaac hesitated for a moment before speaking. "I've been thinking about everything that's happened, the article, the messages I've been getting, and I realized something. There are so many kids out there like me, kids who have big dreams but don't think they'll ever get the chance to chase them." Musk leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. "Go on." "I want to do something to help them," Isaac said, his voice steady. "I want to show them that it's possible, that they can make it if they work hard and don't give up. I don't know exactly how yet, but I want to start giving back." A slow smile spread across Musk's face. "That's a noble goal, Isaac, and I think you're exactly the person to make it happen." Over the next few weeks, with Musk's guidance and support, Isaac began laying the groundwork for an outreach program. The idea was simple: to provide mentorship, resources, and opportunities for young people from underserved communities who dreamed of pursuing careers in STEM fields. Isaac drew from his own experiences, creating a program that focused not just on technical skills, but on building confidence and resilience. The program, called Liftoff, launched to widespread acclaim. Through workshops, internships, and community events, it gave countless young people the chance to explore their potential and discover their passions. And at the heart of it all was Isaac, who remained as humble and driven as ever, working tirelessly to ensure that every participant felt seen and supported. At home, Isaac's family watched his journey with pride. Lila often accompanied him to events, her eyes shining as she listened to her brothers speak about the importance of dreaming big and never giving up. Their mother, though still working hard to support the family, seemed lighter, her smile more frequent. The future they had once feared now felt like a world of possibility. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Lila looked up at Isaac with wide, curious eyes. "Do you think I'll ever be able to do something as big as you, Isaac?" she asked. Isaac smiled, pulling her into a hug. "You can do anything you set your mind to, Lila, and I'll be right there with you every step of the way." Isaac's days at Tesla continued, but now they were filled with a deeper purpose. He wasn't just building machines, he was building futures. And as he stood on the factory floor one afternoon, watching the prototype motor come to life, he realized that this was just the beginning. The world was vast, full of challenges and opportunities, and Isaac was ready to face them all. For his family, for the kids who looked up to him, and for the future he believed in, he would keep moving forward. And in doing so, he would inspire others to do the same. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, Don't forget to hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss our next video. Share this with your friends to spread the inspiration, and check out our channel for more stories like this one. Together, let's keep the conversation going.